What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about a movie that I am almost 1,000% sure that anyone who watches this video has not seen this movie. Today I am talking about King Arthur, Excalibur Rising. This is a movie that stars absolutely nobody that you have heard of. It is directed, written, produced by nobody you've heard of. The company that made it is Excalibur Rising Productions. And this is not an Asylum film. You've probably heard of those Asylum films like when Snakes on a Plane came out. Asylum, they did a movie called Snakes on a Train, trying to cheaply knock off some popular movie and maybe break even by tricking people into watching a movie that's very similar to something popular coming out. This is not from Asylum, but it is a very similar mockbuster to that kind of film. This came out just weeks before the Guy Ritchie King Arthur movie in 2017, King Arthur Legend of the Sword, and this is quite awful. I expected it to be just a little bit better because I have seen other very cheaply made King Arthur movies, and not all of them are bad. There was one from 2015, I think, called Arthur and Merlin, and I quite liked that one. It had a very low budget, just like this movie, but I found myself engaged with the story. I liked the characters, which is not anything that I can say about this movie. So I guess I should start with the plot. The plot starts with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table at the Battle of Camlan. Traditionally in King Arthur stories, that is the last hurrah of the Round Table. That is where King Arthur kills his illegitimate son Mordred, and Mordred kills King Arthur. They both stab each other and die. So we get that going on here. There's a fight, and already, if you are into film production and you like the stuff that I usually gloss over when I talk about movies, you're going to be a little put off by this because the scale doesn't look right. It looks like there are about 12 people at this big, huge battle where there should be hundreds. And I'm willing to give a little bit of slack for something like that because, again, they didn't have a huge budget, so I'm not going to go into this expecting the battle at Rivendell or whatever from The Lord of the Rings. 1,000 Tolkien fans just screamed when I said battle at Rivendell. So I'm not expecting something epic like that that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But still, I do wish maybe they could have had 50 extras in this scene. But it really looks like there's about 12 people. I'm sure some of the extras were doing double scenes, putting on different costumes and stuff, playing different characters. And Arthur, he stabs Mordred, who is his son, who is rebelling against the Round Table. And then Arthur sees the Lady of the Lake, and she's saying, hey, it's time. I don't think anyone else can see the Lady of the Lake. I think it's just Arthur. And then some of his knights, they're following Arthur, trying to see what he's doing. And then Bedivere, he says, hey, you killed Mordred. You did it. And then Arthur says, well, there is another, and then he dies. And at one point in this fight, Merlin sees Arthur starting to wander off, and then somebody runs past him and slaps him in the face, and then Merlin is like, "Rah!" and like goes to chase after this guy instead of going after Arthur. Really weird. Merlin is maybe the weirdest part of this movie. I will get to him in a minute. So anyway, then Arthur, he tells Bedivere, I want you to take Excalibur and throw it in the lake. I don't want it falling into enemy hands. So far, all of this is pretty much right out of the myths that you have read and heard about. If you've ever read L'Amour de Arthur by Thomas Malory, a lot of this happens at the end of Thomas Malory's L'Amour de Arthur. And so I'm thinking, okay, these guys actually did some research. I'm kind of on board with this. And I should point out what the premise of this movie is, or at least the premise that was sold to us. So basically, we are told that Arthur had an illegitimate son who is going to rise from the ashes of Camelot and form a new golden age and fight against the enemies of his father's kingdom. That is essentially the plot of this movie, and that's kind of what happens here. Unfortunately, it doesn't really get to that until the very end of the movie. See, after Bedivere throws Excalibur into the lake, we jump forward 19 years, and then we just kind of stall for most of the movie. Bedivere is with his friend Kay. In the legends, Kay was Arthur's foster brother, and Kay is dying of something, and then Bedivere says, I could go get Merlin, and he could help you. And Kay says, no, leave that mad fool away from me. I don't want him to do anything with me. And I thought, okay, maybe they're doing this thing that I've seen in several typical King Arthur things where Christianity is starting to come in and people are starting to not accept the old pagan ways. And Merlin is a sorcerer, so Christians aren't going to be into Merlin helping them. But then Bedivere starts to do the cross thing, that thing, and Kay says, no, don't do that. Save that for your Christian friends. So I'm confused. Why does Kay not want Merlin to save him if he also is not Christian? But basically this whole scene is just a big waste of time. Kay tells Bedivere like 100 times, leave me be, let me die in peace. So Bedivere leaves, and then there are these younger guys who have stolen some money from Lord Antonius, and I don't even know who Lord Antonius is. Bedivere is leaving wherever Kay was where he was dying, and then these soldiers, they start yelling at him, saying like, did you see where those guys went? And then Bedivere says, no, I didn't, boy. And then they're like, well, let's kill him because he called us boy. And then he fights back a little bit. They stab him in the side, and then they throw him in jail with one of the guys who stole the money from Lord Antonius. And we find out this guy is Owain. This is Arthur's illegitimate son. I should point out, in the legends, Owain actually is not related to Arthur. He is actually Morgan Le Fay's son from Lord Urien, or King Urien. There are kings, and then there's the High King. Arthur generally is the High King, and then all these other kings like Pellinor, Lot, Urien, they answer to Arthur. And so Urien was married to Morgan Le Fay and had a kid, Owain. He's got some stories, but generally he's like your C-level character in the King Arthur mythos. He's usually not very prominent in the stories that he shows up in. But here, we're kind of getting a little bit of a Luke Skywalker thing, I guess, where he doesn't know who he is, and then he finds out that he is much more important than what he ever thought. And so anyway, these two are in jail together, and jail is basically this little outdoor cell with this fence around it, smaller than my room, and then someone comes and takes Owain away so that he can be yelled at by Lord Antonius, and then Lord Antonius says, where's the rest of the money? And Owain says, well, that's it. There is no more. And he says, well, that's impossible because this is only half of what was stolen. And earlier, he was being questioned by someone else. I'll go ahead and tell you, it's Mordred. We saw him die at the beginning, but he's still alive. Anyway, this guy in a hood says, how do you not know how much money was stolen? Don't you have a clerk to count this? And he says, well, yeah, but the clerk was involved with the theft. But now Lord Antonius seems to know exactly how much that was stolen, and we never do return to this subplot of the stolen money. That was basically just a way to get Owain in prison with Bedivere. And anyway, Lord Antonius says, okay, take Owain out and kill him. And by killing him, basically, he has these two knights just start punching him. They don't even, I think eventually they do stab him, but you'd think it would be easier and quicker to just take a sword and cut his head off or whatever. But this is where it gets really weird and confusing, because there was a woman that Owain was sleeping with while the whole heist for the money was going on. She gets stabbed by Lord Antonius. Simultaneously, Bedivere, he grabs a guy's sword, and then he falls on it in the prison cell. While he is doing that, there are these guys running towards the prison cell, and then Bedivere screams, for Arthur! And then he falls on his sword. I don't know who these guys running towards the prison cell were. I don't know if they are other guards, and they saw Bedivere grab the guy's sword, and they were coming to try and stop him, or if they were coming to try and rescue Bedivere. I have no idea. I don't know who those guys are, because they never show up again in the movie. And then while those two stabbings are going on, Owain gets stabbed, and then these guys throw him in the lake. I don't know why they didn't just leave him on the ground. This was the Dark Ages. This would have been like 540 AD, because I think the Battle of Camlan takes place in 520. So this would have been at a time when people weren't super cautious about cleanliness. Let's just throw a dead body on the side of the road. Who cares? So I don't know why they throw it in the lake, other than the plot needs that to happen, because once Owain is thrown in the lake, he meets the Lady of the Lake, and then she gives him Excalibur. And I should point out, Bedivere did tell Owain, you are the king's son. He says that, and then Owain, he comes out of the lake, and then there's this guy, a fisherman. He has something, it actually looks like a garden implement, but apparently he's going to use that to try and spear fish in the lake. And then he he sees Owain. Owain grabs the sword, and then lightning strikes it. And then this guy is like, oh, my king, and he bows down to him. I don't know why just seeing a sword get struck by lightning is enough to make you think this guy is the rightful king. And here's a problem with this movie. Again, very low budget. I don't know what the budget is. It feels like it was less than $1,000, but I don't know what the stakes are. At one point, Bedivere is talking about how we spent so many years trying to keep the Saxons out of our land. But Arthur died 19 years ago. I don't know who has been keeping the Saxons Saxons out of their land for the last 19 years. We hear that Mordred, who is still alive and he is over Lord Antonius, we hear that he is about to make a deal with the Saxons that are going to bring them in. But why has he not done that before now? Why does he want to do that at all? We eventually find out that Mordred and his mother Morgana, they have kept themselves alive and young with the Holy Grail. It has healing properties. If you've seen Indiana Jones, you know that. And somehow these guys got the Holy Grail. Generally, in the Arthurian legends, the Holy Grail can only be found and even seen by someone who is like the purest of heart. Lancelot was not able to find it because he was pretty much the best knight in the kingdom, but there was that whole adultery thing, so he was not able to achieve the Grail quest. So you only had a few characters who were able to achieve the Grail quest generally in these stories. You had Percival, Galahad, in some stories Bors was there. Bors is Lancelot's cousin. So it doesn't really make any sense why the two most evil people in Arthurian legends somehow were able to get the Holy Grail. Merlin hints that somehow Morgana tricked Arthur and that's how she got it. But anyway, these two, they also want this thing called the Godstone, and I'll be honest, I don't even know what the Godstone does or what it's for, but they want it. And then they also want Excalibur. Once they get these three things, basically, Mordred says he wants to set fire to the world. I don't know why. I guess I should talk about the bad guys. They're evil. That's their only characteristic. They do so many things that make no sense. They do things, essentially shooting themselves in the foot, that later makes things so much more difficult for them. So anyway, once Owain gets the sword, I was expecting, okay, he's going to go out there and he's going to form a new round table, a next generation of the round table. And I was really confused at why Bedivere falls on his sword before Owain gets Excalibur, because I was thinking he's going to be kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi in this Star Wars analogy, and he's going to help Owain get a round table together, and then some big battle will happen and Bedivere will die, and then the final act, Owain has to lead these people on his own without Bedivere's guidance. I was expecting something like that, but they don't do that. Once Owain gets the sword, he goes back home. He's talking to his Aunt Lily, and he talks to her a little bit about how he died and then he was brought back to life. He asks if she knew who his parents were. She says yes. We never do find out who Owain's mom is. They just say she was pure of heart. But anyway, Morgana, she has these people, and this is how she's keeping herself young with the Holy Grail, she and Mordred. They have these prisoners, and they will take some of their blood, put it in the Holy Grail, and then drink it. And then that makes them young, and then the person whose blood was put in the Grail, they turn old. And so they take one girl, and they put her on the slab, and then her sister is there. And they tell the sister, you go and steal Excalibur from Owain, and bring it to us, and then we will free your sister. So this girl goes and meets Owain, and then gets him drunk, and then sort of seduces him, but then he's just, barely even able to walk, and they get to his room, and he's almost passed out anyway, but then she hits him in the head with a rock and steals the sword, and then she goes back to Morgana and says, here's the sword, can you free my sister? And then for no reason at all, Morgana stabs the sister, and puts some of her blood in the Grail, but they're already young and hot, they don't need more blood in the Grail, and basically this is what I was talking about, where they do something that shoots themselves in the foot in a huge way later on. So then the sister's screaming, and then Mordred says, you're free to go, you can go, but my mother for no reason at all wanted to stab your sister. So then she goes back to Owain and says, I'm sorry, they had my sister, I had to free her, or I had to free her any way I could. And then they go and they find Merlin, and then Merlin has the Godstone, he gives it to the girl, her name is Ada, and then he says, you're running out of time, the longer you wait, the less likely you are going to be able to bring your sister back to life, because Mordred was stabbed at the Battle of Camlan 20 years earlier. And Merlin says, yeah, he was brought back to life by his mom. And so now Ada, she says, well, if she can bring her son back to life, I want to bring my sister back to life. And so then Owain and Ada, they go to Morgana and Mordred. There's a big fight. Owain ends up killing Mordred, and then there's this other prisoner who comes completely out of nowhere and claws Morgana's eyes out, and then 5 other people come, and they are clawing all over her face. So her face looks real messed up by the end. And then the last scene of the movie is some guy crowning Owain, saying, hey, he's the king, and Ada's kind of smiling. She's got the Godstone. We don't see Merlin there, I don't think, so we don't know what happens with him after that. And then the movie's over, and I was so disappointed by this. For one, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's so much stuff here where I'm like, this is weird. Both as a fan of King Arthur, like the bad guys inexplicably having the Holy Grail, and also stuff that for anyone, even if you've never read or heard of anything King Arthur, it would still be weird and messed up. Stuff that I feel like this could have been a good movie. I was interested in the idea of Arthur's illegitimate son having to rise up and try and take back the throne and rebuild the Round Table. I think all of that could have been really cool. But unfortunately, this movie, it just feels like it was kind of shot day to day. Like, okay, today, what if we had them meet Merlin? It doesn't feel like it had a script, which is kind of messed up. This allegedly is written and directed by the same guy. His name was, I think, Anthony Smith. It says it was directed by him, written by him, and executive produced by him. So this could have been all just shot on the fly. I have no idea. Like I said, this is pretty bad. I guess I should say not the worst King Arthur movie I've ever seen. The worst would be Merlin the Return with Adrian Paul as Lancelot. If you've ever seen that, or if you've never seen that, go ahead and do yourself a favor and look for some clips of that on YouTube, because that is by far worse than this. But this might be the second worst. This is really bad. Yeah, I had absolutely no expectations for this. I knew a little bit about the plot, and I thought that could be interesting, and I was still very disappointed, even with very, very low expectations for this. So that's about all that I have to say about King Arthur, Excalibur Rising. I hope you guys like this video, even if you've never seen the movie or never heard of it, and I will be back later in the week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.